to growth. Success of an entrepreneur.
We've raised the bar.
Learn firsthand from successful business owners and create your own path to success.
I'm going to show you how great I am.
It's time to hit the road to growth with team lead of the Enriquez Group, Realtor Vinny.
Hi, Roach Growth listeners. Today I have Alan Stein, keynote speaker, author, and I mean, if you've read the captions, you're probably here for probably some stories of ex-players that he's helped coach and brings to the next level. We were kind of talking about before we got on mic, some of the pictures. And if you're not watching us live on YouTube or watching us on YouTube or you're listening to the podcast, you'll see some pictures of him with, was it Kobe and Kevin Durant, right?
Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, thank you, Alan, for being here today.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm looking forward to a fun conversation.
Wait, why is I'm guessing that the picture in the back with the 3 kids, are those your kids?
Those are my 3 kids. Yeah, that was a picture when they were much younger. So at present, I've got 13-year-old twin sons and an 11-year-old daughter. So my sons just started 8th grade. My daughter just started 6th grade. So all 3 of them are in middle school right now.
Do they ever get angry that their picture's smaller than the other ones?
No, they've got bigger pictures throughout the apartment, so no, they're okay.
Oh, okay, gotcha. All right. Well, yeah, walk us through, man. What's a quick synopsis? What's your elevator pitch when people ask you, hey, Alan, what do you do?
Well, what I do at present is I'm a keynote speaker and an author, but at my heart, I will always be a performance coach. And really how I got started down that track was basketball was my first love. And I fell in love with the game at 5 years old. And I'm so grateful that here, 40 plus years later, basketball is still a major pillar of my life. And I was able to play collegiately up through Elon University down in North Carolina in the mid 90s. And while I was at Elon, I started to develop an equal love for the training side of the game, for strength and conditioning and nutrition and mindset and what we now call performance training. So when I graduated college in the late 90s, I figured what could be better than combining my first love of basketball with this newfound love of performance training and strength and conditioning. And I became a basketball performance coach. And I moved back to the Washington, D.C. area, which is where I'm from and where I currently reside, and was able to work at 2 very renowned high school programs that combined have put over a dozen players in the NBA, the most notable of which is Kevin Durant. And because of my work at those 2 schools, I got on the radar to work some events for Nike, Jordan Brand, USA Basketball, and I had a chance to work events, the summer skills academies with the likes of Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Steve Nash, and some pretty heralded players. And so I've gotten to see, what it takes to get to that level, as well as what it takes to maintain and sustain excellence at that level. And then the current iteration of what I do, 6 years ago, I decided to leave the basketball training space and make a leap over to the corporate keynote speaking space. And I now share with businesses, large and small, with entrepreneurs, with executives, the way they can apply the same mindsets, rituals, routines, and disciplines that I learned through the game and through these elite players.
Do you remember the moment when you knew that you didn't have, I guess, either the tools or the skill sets, or I guess the ability, or whatever the right terminology would be, to make it to the next level?
You mean as far as playing?
Yeah.
I think you summed it up pretty well. And that was very clear to me. I mean, I knew, as a young kid in elementary school, I had the goal of playing in the NBA, but you're talking about a guy growing up in the 80s. So this is well before the internet, which means a kid my age at that time, you can't really see any farther than the end of your street. So, as a young kid, you're thinking, well, I'm the best player in my elementary school. That's probably good enough to play in the NBA. And then, as you matriculate up and you play in high school, and then you have AAU, and then you go to college, you realize the world is much bigger than your own neighborhood. So it was clear to me by senior year of high school that playing in the NBA was most likely not going to be a reality. But I knew that I had the ability to play in college, and that was something I wanted to do. But in college is when I realized that while I might not have what it takes to play the game professionally, I absolutely have what it takes to be able to coach or to add value to players that are at that level. And that's what I took a lot of pride in. And I love the fact that I was able to, help coach and teach and work with players that were far better than I had ever hoped to be.
That transition of changing, I guess, the goal, but still in the kind of the sphere is always a kind of intriguing thing to me. I mean, so was it a very easy switch to go, okay, I know I can't make it there, but I'm going to go to college and at least get an education out of it? I mean, what did that kind of look like? Was there conversations or was it internal? I mean, what did that look like?
Well, it was mostly just the acceptance of reality. I mean, it's not even like I was on the cusp of someone that might be able to play professionally. And if I were to go all in, I could make that dream come true. I mean, when you look at the sheer math, I mean, the fact that I was able to even play in college means I was in the upper 1% of anyone that's ever dribbled a basketball. And I don't say that to brag. I just say that merely for context. But then to end up playing in the NBA, you've got to be in the 0.01% of the 1%. I mean, it's pretty astronomical. I mean, when you look at the NBA at present, I mean, think about it. We have 8 billion people on the planet and we have 450 players in the NBA. Like, that's a very, very special group. So, I wasn't discouraged by the fact that I knew that dream was going to have to shift. And it wasn't from lack of anything that I did on my part. It just wasn't in the cards. And that part I was okay with. And I was just thankful to find a shift that allowed me to stay very close to the game and be a part of the game that I loved, just in a different capacity. And one of the reasons I'm so passionate about my work now is when you look at any sport, any physical activity, the physicality plays a role. I mean, to play in the NBA, it certainly helps if you're on the taller side. It helps if you're athletic and explosive and fast and strong and coordinated. But when you look in the business world and the real world that the rest of us live in, those things are no longer prerequisites. I mean, you can be just as successful of an entrepreneur, whether you're 4'10" or 6'10", and whether you can jump on top of a curb or you can dunk a basketball blindfolded, those things are irrelevant. What's more important in the business world are the controllable factors and the intangibles and the things that all of us can work on. So there's really no limit to what one can accomplish in business, when in sport, theoretically, there is absolutely a genetic limit to what we can all do.
I agree with that mindset. And how many people do you coach currently don't believe in that mindset, believe they can't do it because they were born with this or grew up in that?
Oh, well, that's a whole nother can of worms. And I'm glad you went in that direction. There's no question, tons of limiting beliefs out there. And I can say through firsthand experience, I mean, I used to carry several limiting beliefs when I was younger and first starting out in the real world, if you will. And part of the work I try to do now on myself is untether from those limiting beliefs and, not come from such a scarcity mindset, but have much more of an abundance mindset. I mean, these are all things that I'm on the journey as well. And something I say every time I'm on stage or every time I write something on page is everything I share now and everything we'll share in this conversation. I'm not coming from a place of mastery. I'm not batting 1,000. I don't have straight A's and all of these things. These are all things that I'm continuing to work on. And the stuff that I preach and the stuff that I teach is all stuff that I do myself. And, so I have empathy and compassion for someone that has limiting beliefs, because I have had them and I still have some, if I'm being honest with myself. Now I'm making improvements and I'm making progress. And I have fewer limiting beliefs today than I had 5 years ago. And I have less intense limiting beliefs today than I had 10 years ago. But there's still something that are a barrier to me being the person I'm capable of. But now I have an awareness of them and I can work through them.
What was harder for you to get past, holding limiting beliefs on people you coach, like even back when you were in teaching those high school kids, compared to the limiting beliefs that you had to overcome yourself?
Oh, the ones for myself are always the hardest, without question. But that's kind of the rite of passage. I think what makes it easier for me to work with audiences or work with different groups is that I can see both sides of it. Another one of my life principles now that I really try and model for my children and model for every area of my life is to refrain from blaming, complaining, and making excuses. Like, I don't believe we'll ever improve our lives, improve our situation if we blame, complain, and make excuses. Well, if you would have known me 20 years ago, I was the king of blaming, complaining, and making excuses. I mean, anytime something didn't go my way or anytime I didn't achieve a goal or get my preferred outcome, I would blame, complain, or make an excuse. Well, now that I've untethered from that paradigm and I have a different operating system, I can see both sides of it. So I have compassion and empathy for someone that unfortunately falls victim to those traits. And that gives me a better way to work with them. Very similarly, when I was in high school, I was a starter on the basketball team. I was the leading scorer. I played the most. When I got to Elon, the reverse was true. I was a role player. I sat at the end of the bench. I didn't play very much. I hardly scored at all. And once again, that gave me a peek behind both sides of the curtain. So when I would work with a player who wasn't getting as much playing time as they wanted or felt they deserved, and they started to develop a bad attitude, I didn't judge them or chastise them. I actually embraced that because I know what that's like. I know, what that feels like. So any of these areas where I've been able to see both sides of it, I'm hoping that just arms me with more empathy and compassion and allows me to coach and to pour into people at a higher level.
Was there a moment, and I think sometimes at least with newer coaches, I'll hear them talk about them using more of who they are when they're talking to, I guess, a person they're teaching, compared to really allowing the person shine of, I guess, who they are, kind of saying that, oh, this person can't do it because I couldn't do it, compared to, let me look at this person. Was there a time when you were first starting coaching that you had to kind of work through that?
Oh, absolutely. And that's part of the coaching journey. I mean, one of the things I experience, and I see a lot of coaches, is you kind of assimilate to the coaches that had the biggest impact on you. So you're almost imitating other coaches, because it takes a little while until you find your own voice, you find your own rhythm, you find your own style. And same thing is true as a speaker. I mean, I have a much more authentic and genuine voice from stage now than I did 6 years ago when I first started, because, you're still trying to figure those different things out. And that, self-awareness, the introspection and reflection, all of that is part of the journey. And for me, anytime I'm coaching or pouring into an audience, I do the best I can not to project what's coming from me onto them. Instead, I try and look at them as a completely blank canvas. Try not to make assumptions, try not to make judgments. Do the best I can to lean in with curiosity and fascination. For me, anytime I'm working with a group, I want to ask more questions than I give answers. My goal is to get them to come up with the conclusion that's best for them, not for me to tell them what to do, but to ask them the right question and let them come up with what they think is the best course of action. And then, they'll have more buy-in and believe in, because now they're the ones that's kind of, creating their own future.
Looking back at kind of where you came from to where you are today, how much was this a roadmap relative to like just opportunity kind of popped up? Because you kind of jumped through like from college, right? Then you teach in high school, and then Kevin Durant. I mean, you probably didn't have any idea that you're going to come across Kevin Durant, and then from there, Nike, and then Kobe, and so on and so forth. I mean, was there a plan in place, or was just opportunity and then to the next opportunity, or how did that work out?
Yeah, there was not much of a plan in place. You nailed it. It was much more, I was doing something that I really enjoyed doing and was very thankful for an opportunity to do it. And then opportunities just started to pop up and arise. And, when I first graduated from Elon, I did not have a 5 or 10 year vision of where I wanted it to go. I took advantage of opportunities. I was grateful for the chance to be around some really high performers and have folks pour into me. But it wasn't particularly strategic. Now that's changed when I decided to move over to the speaking world, which I did in 2017, having all of that kind of now in my tailwinds and that as an experience. I've been much more strategic in forecasting a vision for my speaking business, and been much more strategic in the decisions I've made and how I've built this business. But yeah, when I first started in my early 20s as a basketball performance coach, I was just kind of stumbling along from opportunity to opportunity. And now with that said, I still held myself to a very high standard of excellence with professionalism. I still poured my heart and soul into every athlete, every team, and every workout. I was meticulous about designing workout programs and building relationships. I mean, I don't want to make it sound like I was very laissez-faire and just casual. Nothing could be further from the truth. I took my work very seriously and I poured my life into it, but I didn't really have a vision. If you would have asked the 25-year-old Alan, where do you think this is going to take you? He would have had no idea. And that was okay.
If someone's listening right now and maybe they're that younger you, right? Where had these opportunities pop up. And now even with like, I mean, it seems like there's more opportunity, especially with social media out there. I mean, what kind of advice would you provide to that person to dissect the opportunity and see if it's the right fit for them?
Well, in this case, I would actually tell them to do the opposite of what I did, which was just not have much of a vision. I would recommend that someone does try and get clarity on where they're trying to go, or at least who they're trying to become. And it doesn't mean they have to have a 20-year vision or a 10-year vision, or honestly, even a 5-year vision, but have a rough idea of where you'd like to see your life or see your business or see your relationship in, say, 6 months, a year, 2 years. Because once you have clarity on where you're trying to go, you can use that to help make better decisions and to help decipher what are good opportunities and what are opportunities to pass on. Because you just need to find out what's in alignment with where you're trying to go. All opportunities are not created equal. You might have an opportunity for me when we hang up on this call that's not in alignment with where I'm trying to take my speaking business. And while I would be appreciative of you thinking of me, and it might actually be a great opportunity, but it's not a great opportunity for me and where I'm trying to go. And in that case, I would respectfully pass. So I think the only way you can decide whether an opportunity is worthy of your time, energy, money, what have you, whatever investment you're going to make, is if it's lining up with where you're trying to go. And I didn't know that when I was in my 20s and even early 30s. I was just jumping at anything that came my way. I very much had the squirrel mindset of any shiny object I would jump at. And it just so happens that looking back, many of those happened to be the right opportunities at the right time, but it wasn't because I was doing anything strategic. I just kind of walked backwards and I guess had a little bit of luck in some cases.
Do you honestly believe it was mostly luck?
Well, luck is an interesting word. I mean, as a concept, I don't really believe in luck. I believe in cause and effect. I believe that we create our own luck, quote unquote, by our discipline and our habits and our decisions. But I do think on some level, an opportunity presented itself. I just kind of randomly said yes, and it turned out to be something that worked out in my favor. So, if we want to call that luck, that's great. If we just want to call it good fortune, that's great. But similarly, there have been plenty of things that, I've tripped up on my own feet and I've made some bad decisions that did not put me on the road of where I was trying to go. So it's all kind of, they're all kind of intertwined.
Can you walk us through maybe one of those bad decisions and kind of how you got through it?
Well, I mean, two obvious ones. One is I'm very amicably divorced. So I was married for 5 years and I've been divorced for almost 9 years now. And, nobody goes into a marriage expecting it to end in divorce or dissolve. So I guess one on face value could look at that as kind of a failure of the relationship. But, after doing plenty of internal work, it was the best decision for both of us. It was the right decision for both of us. And what at the time felt like something awful was happening. Now I look back and say my divorce is one of the best things that's ever happened because it put me on a new course. Another example is, and I say this with, in the spirit of vulnerability and transparency, for the first 40 years of my life, I made really poor financial decisions. I didn't save or invest near as much as I spent. And, I had to try and figure out a way to course correct. Now, I'm proud that over the last several years, I've gotten much better at making wise and disciplined financial decisions. I have a financial advisor who I call my money coach, and I'm getting myself back on track. But those were a series of behaviors and tendencies that weren't serving me well, which again, piggybacking on something I said earlier, is what gives me compassion for others. For me, I've always identified as an athlete. So physical fitness, working out, eating right, getting sleep, those things come very naturally to me and very easily to me. But I understand to a lot of people, those things don't come naturally. They're very hard. It's really hard for people to get on a workout program and really hard for them to eat clean. But I have compassion for that. Because for other people, making good financial decisions comes very easily to them. And for me, that's where I got stuck. And that's where I made poor decisions. So even though we might have different areas and you may have different areas where you're really strong and other areas where maybe you struggle, it doesn't matter if they're the same as mine. I just have compassion for you as a human being, that there are some things that you find challenging. And for me, making good financial decisions was something that I found challenging until I've course corrected.
Was there a that one like low like moment where you actually had to course correct? I mean, you hear about it where people they see themselves in the mirror and they go, "Oh my gosh, I'm heavy set. I gotta go start working out." Or, "Oh, you know what? I woke up in a ditch. Now I gotta stop drinking." I mean, was there a low moment with the financial aspect of it that started getting you back on course correcting?
Not a true rock bottom. I mean, I was never at risk of being homeless. I was never at risk of any type of major adversity that I know other people have faced. I just kind of woke up and said, you know what? I'm in my early 40s. I have 3 children that I need to provide for, and I don't have the nest egg, the retirement, or the future that I believe I should have at my current age. You know, when I looked backwards and said, you know, here were decisions that just went awry. And most of them, I was just trying to be a little too aggressive in getting ahead. I made a couple of very unwise investments thinking that I could make a quick buck, and those ended up backfiring big time, and I lost several bucks. So it was my own fault. I was trying to skip steps. I was trying to, it's the quote unquote, like get rich quick, and all of those understandably backfired. And that's when I said, you know what, this isn't the way to do it. The way to do it is to align with my actual beliefs in, never getting bored with the basics and focusing on the fundamentals and being very consistent and having processes and systems, and once I started implementing those mindsets and operating systems into my financial life, then I was able to start making better decisions. But no, I don't want to be over dramatic and act like, I was homeless or anything like that. I most certainly wasn't. I just was getting by, and I'm not the type of person that is okay with a life of getting by. I want to have a life of abundance, and I want to make good decisions so that I can prosper in every area of my life, including financially, so that I can do the things I want to do, provide for the people that are most important to me, and live a really good life.
With your speaking and writing, how much of a relationship do you still have with basketball?
It's kind of one on the outskirts. I mean, I still have relationships with folks that are in the basketball world. All 3 of my children now play youth basketball. So I'm kind of back in the gym on weekends, watching games and going to their practices. I just don't do any direct training anymore, but I still have, dozens of coaches in the college and NBA level and trainers that I still keep in touch with, that I'm very grateful for, still follow my stuff, and I stay in touch with them. And there have been some teams I've been able to speak to and do some things like that. But yeah, I haven't done any of the actual training since 2017.
Do you miss it at all? Or is it, you still get satisfied with what you're doing?
Yeah. Oh, I love what I'm doing now. I do certainly miss some of the relationships because I'm a relationship guy, but yeah. I don't miss the actual training part. I was starting to reach burnout on that anyway. Having spent 20 years in the gym and in the weight room, figuring out sets and reps and I was starting to get burnt out on that. So I am so invigorated and so energized by the work I do now and love what I do now. And I'm still connected to it. If you were to hear one of my keynotes or attend one of my workshops, or if one of your listeners or viewers hires me for one of those things, you'll hear tons of basketball stories and analogies and lessons that I learned. So I still feel very connected to the game because I'm keeping alive all of those things that I learned. And now that my kids are playing, I'm still back in the gym, and, we go to NBA games and college games, and I'm still around the game. I'm just not in the game.
Gotcha. I mean, something I think for just, I guess, business owners in general, and it'd be interesting your perspective on it, because you have such strong relationships from over the years. With when Kobe was around, or Kevin Durant, Kevin, well, you know what I'm talking about, and all the other college and NBA coaches. I mean, how much of the time are you leveraging those relationships to get basically your book pushed out there, or speaking engagements? Is that like a balancing act of using it but not using it?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, I'm of the belief of being of service to others. And one of the phrases I like to use is, when you learn to shift your focus off of what you want from people and you put it on to what you want for people, then you just become the most magnetic person in the room. So I take pride in the relationships that I've built. I'm thankful for the relationships I've built, but I'm always trying to figure out ways that I can pour into other people. What can I do to be of service to you? I mentioned this before we hit record. I mean, the only reason I'm doing this show is because I want to add value to you, and I want to add value to your listeners and your viewers. I don't have any hidden agenda or ulterior motive for being on this show other than to meet someone new. I'm going to learn from you, and I look forward to sharing things that I hope you and your following find helpful. That's it. And I try to approach all of my relationships that way. And I found that when you do that, just the way the world works, people want to help you. They want to support you. They want to refer you business. They want to buy your book when you have one. So it's never about asking. It's more about being of service, and then the world will just even out. And this is another area where I'm better at it now, because in my 20s, I was atrocious with it. In my 20s, anytime I would do something for someone, I had an expectation that they would owe me, or they would need to do something for me. And I was the king of being a scorekeeper and say, hey man, I've done you 3 favors. You owe me a favor now. And I found that is transactional at best, but it's a way to really erode and corrode relationships. Now I give freely with no expectation of anything in return, which means I'm not disappointed. Like, when we're done this call, you don't owe me a thing. Your listeners don't owe me a thing. I'm here because I want to be here and I want to share. And having that type of mindset, you build a nice tribe of people. And, when I came out with my first book, I mean, I had plenty of people reaching out to me saying, Alan, how can we support you? How can we best support your book? Or and I was incredibly grateful for them to do that. But you don't need to ask if you make it about service of others. And one of the quotes that I did not come up with this quote, and I don't know who did, or I'd give them proper attribution, but that's very in line with this, is that a candle loses nothing by lighting another candle. And that's really how I try to look at my work. My number one job is to light as many candles as I can, whether it's on stage, on page, or through a podcast or an interview like this. I'm just trying to pay forward the things that I've been fortunate enough to learn and hope that other people find value in them. And by lighting other people's candles, it doesn't make mine shine any dimmer. All it does is kind of spread that around. And I can look at so many people that have helped light my candle and pour into me. I just want to be a steward to pay that forward. So I think for business owners, being of service to your team, being of service to your actual clients or customers, always trying to give freely and pour into others, it will come back to you, and you can build an incredibly strong and successful business, sustainable business with that paradigm.
Well, to dive deep in that, I mean, how do you protect yourself in your eyes from giving and not getting return, right? I mean, for example, let's say there's a high school kid that reaches out to you and it's like, hey, Alan, I have a question. How does this? And then they reach out to you again. Hey, I have another question for this. I have another question for this. And they just constantly kind of doing that. You couldn't do that all day long. I mean, right? And you got other stuff you have to do. So how do you protect yourself from giving, and not having those people around you that are going to actually give you something in return?
Yeah, no, that is a brilliant question. So insightful. And you need to create your own boundaries, and then you need to have discernment. If a high school kid reaches out to me on Instagram through DM and asks me a question, I'm most likely going to answer that, because I just remember that when I was in high school, if I would have had an opportunity to talk to someone that could help me, how much I would have appreciated them getting back to me. So in that instance, I'll most likely get back to them. But if they start DMing me every single day with multiple questions, then I'll just politely write back, because I do believe in getting back to everyone, and just say, hey, you're asking some great questions. My plate is too full at present to answer these, but go check out this site or read this book. I think it'll answer most of what you're looking for. Please keep in touch. And I'm wishing you the best. And, doing that. So I believe there's a way to politely and professionally and tactfully say no, or not allow everyone to siphon your time. And that's really important. And that's a skill set I'm still trying to get better at, because, I have most of my life identified as a people pleaser, and I like to say yes, and I like to do everything I can. But as you just said so brilliantly, if you're pulled in a million different directions, then you can't stay focused on what's actually going to move you or your business forward. So I think you need to be able to figure that out, and have that type of discernment, but put those boundaries up. And I also realize, at my current level, I don't get thousands of DMs. Like, I get a dozen or so DMs, every few days. And it's realistic for me when time is available to be able to respond. If I was on the level of someone, 10x where I am, and they're getting thousands and thousands of DMs, I mean, there's just no way that they'd be able to respond to those. So I also take into account that at my current level, my workload is different than maybe it will be 5 years from now. Who knows? Maybe 5 years from now, I will have so many more inbound inquiries and questions and people wanting things that I won't be able to oblige at the same pace that I can now. So, there'll always be a different season.
You never know. In 5-10 years from now, you might have some artificial intelligence that's answering questions on your behalf.
That is very true.
If we're talking in 5-10 years from now, I mean, where do you ideally want to be with your business, with yourself? Yeah.
Yeah. So what I'll first do is I look at the person that I'm trying to become. That's my epicenter. And, for me, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, I want that version of Alan Stein Jr. to be physically, mentally, and emotionally fit. I want that version of Alan Stein Jr. to have a great, deep connection with his children, with his family, his friends, and the most important people in his life. And I want that version of Alan Stein Jr. to be doing work he considers meaningful and in service of others. And the reason that is my target is I use that for the decisions I make today. So every single decision I make in my life, I ask myself, is making this decision going to take me closer to becoming that guy, or is it going to take me further away? And then every single day, I just try to make as many decisions as I can that are in alignment with becoming that person. And I'm not perfect on that. I'm not batting 1,000 every day, but I figure if most of the decisions I make, most of the days are in alignment with becoming that person, then I'm designing my own future. If you and I do talk again 5 years from now, I will be physically, mentally, and emotionally fit. I will have a great relationship with my children, family, and friends, and I will be doing work I consider meaningful and in service of others. And the reason I can say that without any hesitation is because those are the decisions I'm making now. So I'm designing that future. But the beautiful part is I'm not delaying any of those things. I'm reaping those benefits in real time because I'm making those decisions now. And I say this with pride and with gratitude. I hope it doesn't sound like I'm lacking humility, but right now in this moment, I am physically, mentally, and emotionally fit. I do have a great relationship with my kids, and I absolutely find major purpose in being of service in the work that I do. So to me, it's always about figuring out the person you want to become and then designing your life and your decisions and your habits around becoming that person.
Do you have a set time of how often you self-reflect? I mean, I talked to someone before and they do it every Friday. I mean, do you have a time?
I mean, I make time every single day of my life to have some quiet and some stillness. And most of that time is in some type of self-reflection. I'm constantly checking in with myself. Now, I also identify as being heavily introverted. A lot of people are surprised to hear that because of my vocation. And I love being with people. I love being in discussions like this. This is so much fun for me. I love being on stage, but doing these things exhausts me. Doing these things actually drains my tank, which means the way that I recoup after a keynote or a workshop or a podcast is I need solitude. I need alone time. I need time to refill my tank so that the next time I have to be on, my tank is full. And so I have plenty of alone time and solitude built into my week for that very reason. And during that, yes, I'm very reflective and aware. And, before I go to bed every night, I do two things. One, I have an idea of what is on the agenda for the next day, what it is I'm hoping to accomplish, the people I'm going to meet, the things I'm going to do. But I also ask myself a pretty important question. Every night before I go to bed, I basically ask myself, I say, Alan, you just traded 24 hours of your life for the progress that you made today. Are you happy with that trade? And if the answer is yes, then I get a really peaceful night's sleep. On the rare occasion that the answer is no, today was not my best day. I didn't show up as my best self. I didn't make very good decisions. I take some time to reflect on why that may have happened. And I don't blame, complain, or make excuses. I hold myself fully accountable. I try to learn a lesson of why that day maybe went off the rails or went a little bit sideways. And then I give myself permission to be less than perfect. And I flip the script and I move to the next play. So I still get a peaceful night's sleep. And I just acknowledge, Alan, today was not your best day, but let's get a good night's sleep. You get another crack at this thing tomorrow.
Well, thank you so much, Alan, for being on the Road to Growth podcast. If someone's listening right now and they're looking to get more information, what's the best way to find your books, speaking engagements, things like that?
Sure, man. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate the opportunity. They can go to alansteinjr.com. That's the hub of everything I do. I'm also very active on Instagram, Twitter, or I guess it's called X now, and LinkedIn. I'm just at Alan Stein Jr. on those platforms. I'm very accessible and very responsive. So if someone does send me a DM, I'll get back to them unless they send me one every day for 6 months. And then as far as the books are concerned, you can get Raise Your Game or Sustain Your Game on Amazon or Audible or wherever you like to get your books and audiobooks. They're pretty easily found.
Any last words of wisdom? Any last parting thoughts you want to throw out there?
The last thing I'll say is the primary lesson I learned from Kobe Bryant back in 2007 really reshaped my perspective on everything. And what he said to me was, the best never get bored with the basics. So the road to growth and the road to building a good life and the road to building a good business is making a commitment to work on the fundamentals, a relentless commitment during the unseen hours to work on the fundamentals and work towards mastery of those, because that's the foundation to which everything else is built. And as soon as you start to skip the basics and start to skip steps, is when eventually you're gonna get caught.
Yeah, getting too big for the basics. That's a great thing for Kobe right there. Thank you guys. For listening right there. Thank you, Alan, so much for giving us so much information right there. And you can definitely tell. For people again watching the YouTube, if you haven't watched the YouTube and you're on the podcast, go watch the YouTube. You kind of see, and now putting the pieces together. There are a couple of times you're talking, and you'd see like a really big smile, right? And you're like, okay, you know what? He might be getting a little drink. I have a buddy that's same kind of situation. He does a lot of speaking stuff, and he has to do it all the time. I go, dude, how do you do this? When I talk to you when you're not on the mic or anything like that, you're very kind of mellow tone, really relaxed. And he goes, I have to kind of be my best self. I have to force myself to do that. So I kind of started noticing that later on the interview. So thank you so much, Alan, for being here. And hopefully everyone got some great nuggets. Go in the show notes and go find Alan. Bye, everyone.